Thank you for all having me here today. I'm a senior APM at Twitch, and I'm going to be covering a little bit about what we do at Twitch Esports, kind of how it works, how we approach various different programs for the department as a whole across the board, both for mobile and then the rest of the company, and then kind of covering a little bit in particular about what we've done with Vainglory in 2016 and how we've kind of helped get that program started off the board. All right, so what is Twitch Esports? Well, first off, we should probably start with what is Twitch. We're a social broadcasting platform. You may have kind of seen it in comparison to a lot of other different platforms out there, but we are kind of the largest at this point in time, which is very exciting. And one of the most important pieces is that we kind of focus on that social engagement. So actually, I was watching the previous presentation talking a lot about engaging in the customers, that moving from that standard pay TV model, on-air model to what is that engagement model, and we're kind of at the forefront of that, and that's a very core part of our experience. The esports team, we work directly with developers to get their products both onto our platform, as well as help a lot of different developers on various scales across the industry kind of understand how to utilize esports not just in a marketing capacity, but in a way to tell a narrative, to engage users, and to really kind of drive a circular value back to the product. So going from a kind of watching esports experience to getting back involved in the game, to getting more interested in the ecosystem, and kind of that circular narrative. We view esports as again, not just strictly a marketing vehicle, but as a large pyramid central to a community. So we start at the bottom, we look at what is the engagement of the users in an esports ecosystem, in a competitive ecosystem. How do you get them involved in competitive play? How do you get them involved in really just seeing what's more to the game from a competitive experience standpoint? And then we kind of move up into this competitive organized play standpoint of, okay, we have a lot of people who are interested in the game and competing, and then how do we kind of start to create these narratives around the community ecosystems that have developed around it, whether it's community tournaments or groups or clans. How do we build that into something that's a bit more kind of sustainable for a long-term sense? And then at the very top, we want to create this pro-level experience that everyone can aspire towards, and it's very important to have people able to reach that level from wherever they're at. So you want to have this narrative of, okay, we had someone come in at the bottom, they worked their way up to the top, through the community events, through the organized play. That kind of empowers anyone who's watching an esports broadcast to say, yes, I can be there one day. So at Twitch, what do we do as Esports Program Managers? Well, we engage with the rest of the company, really to help kind of tie everything together from the esports perspective and working with developers. So we'll work with our internal teams, our platform products teams, to explore new products and how they can enable a new developer to kind of engage the audience more effectively. We work with marketing to help kind of promote the products across the board, legal and finance to handle all sorts of vendor relationships if we're running a program in that capacity. Twitch sales to work on partnerships and selling the different products and broadcasts. The partnerships team to help engage the overall audience. We don't see our esports programs as kind of this singular, we're going to do one thing with the program. We like to engage the entire ecosystem across the board. So we want to encourage people who are playing to stream, and how do we engage with them. Our engineering teams are very important. We've been rolling out 1080p across the board and working on that in our top tier events. And then internally, our esports PMs focus on kind of production management to make broadcast better. We run a number of productions kind of directly with vendors on some of the programs. Creative and web development to help draw people into and understand what they're watching, when they should be watching. League operations, we have a core team who kind of goes and centralizes how leagues should be designed across the board, and some of their meetings end up with very interesting whiteboard models there. And then finally, our marketing and social department. We have a dedicated Twitch Esports Twitter, and then we also run a number of individual Twitters and social channels for our products. And of course, I want to do a little bit of a promotion slide. We're ubiquitous across the board because not only do we broadcast events, not only do we work with teams directly just for sponsorships, but as well as kind of how do we get them to be better broadcasters. We host esports events directly, and then we also create custom esports solutions for developers. And these will be anything from very small products to how do we help your game get some additional visibility? How can we help that competitive bottom level start to build up on its own, all the way to running a full ecosystem? So talking about mobile esports and focusing on developing mobile esports titles, and this is actually a picture from one of the most recent Vainglory events. This was actually from our Worlds event in December. This title has gotten me a little bit in trouble before, so I want to clarify when I say this. Don't design a mobile esports game does not mean you shouldn't focus on esports. It means you should think about esports when making a great game, but focus on making a great game. So at the very base, all your successful games, both mobile and kind of classic esports games, are built around great titles, first and foremost. So when you're developing a game, is the game fun? Focus on that first. And then, is there an inherent competitive nature? Not all games have that. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. But how are your players going to engage with each other? Is there a competitive kind of ecosystem groundwork that you're building into the product? If there is, create a hypothesis around how those players are going to engage each other across the game. And then the last one is very important and often challenging in the mobile space, but does the technology allow for you to create competitive viewing experiences that are compelling? And I think Vainglory was a great example. They have a dedicated spectator mode that actually runs on a PC, and that allows us to easily broadcast the game itself. As you're moving into your alpha and beta state, working with the players to gather feedback regularly is exceptionally important, because not only understanding how they play, but how they want to play is kind of the second step in there. Tracking the competitive player behavior, making sure that you're following what players are doing, how they're doing it, and then why they're doing it. A big one here that we often find is difficult for developers, especially smaller developers, to commit resources to are carving out the engineering time, kind of having that in your production schedule, man-months blocked off to say, okay, competitive is a core part of our experience, our players are utilizing this a lot, we're going to put down time that we're going to dedicate engineering resources to create competitive systems over the course of the game development process and then post-release. And then finally, one of the big ones to think about is how are you going to foster community growth, both from systems within the games and then outside of it as well. And that helps naturally create the first level, the first base community level of people who will run tournaments on their own, how they'll get engaged on their own. After you release, you'll want to, again, take the resource data that you've kind of been generating over time, the man-months that you have set aside, and allocate resources with data, specifically with data, so that you can say, okay, we have these people, 80% of the user base wants to play in this style, and how can we continue to engage them and improve that engagement? Competitive play is that driving desirable behavior. I think we've all seen a lot of trolls in our day, and Twitch chat is no difference, no exception. But there's a lot of ways that you can kind of tweak things fairly simply to avoid negative behavior. And I think there's a number of learnings out there from MOBAs in particular, both with League and actually Vainglory has quite a few as well, around some desirable player behavior tweaks. And then finally, can the community support formal esports formats and events naturally on their own? So this kind of goes back to, we've developed a community because we have systems in game that allow people to congregate naturally. How can we empower them to have kind of a sense of ownership in the product, have a sense of ownership in the game? And you'll find that as soon as you do that, they will spend their time and their resources to create some of that base level for you. And then it becomes a matter of encouraging that across the board. And that type of level at Twitch is something that we really do like to encourage across the board, both from saying, okay, there's a bunch of community games out there. How can we promote these organizations that are running these broadcasts? How can we fast track them, whether it's to a partnership level or promote them on the front page? And then we'll utilize them later on to help increase the reach of the larger events that are run directly by developers or by us. So there's a few key questions to think about in relation to goals of your business. Why exactly are you developing an esports program? Is it to make a legitimacy play in your product, to kind of reach that core audience that says, yes, this is an esport? Is it just a marketing vehicle? Is it to increase revenue? Are you finding that your competitive players are strong revenue drivers within the product? Is it to grow the community, to make it last a lot longer? Again, your esports players, your competitive players, they tend to stick around a long time. Or is it to reach new markets? For us on the Twitch side, we focus a lot on the narrative, and I think that it's important whenever developing a product to really identify what that narrative is. Why are the players participating? How do they get involved? Why do they care? How does it contribute to the game experience? And is the content valuable for everybody? So everyone from the actual casual players who are just tuning into a stream or just launching the game itself, why do they care about that esports content, and how can we kind of loop back around to make them go from just a simple viewer to a watcher to get engaged in the game itself? So this is actually a picture from one of our recent events here, but I kind of want to cover real quick a few partnerships and challenges things. So one of the reasons that we created this department at Twitch was to allow developers who might not have understanding in esports or resources in esports to kind of help kickstart them into an experience that is going to help their game grow. So that's kind of why we exist in many ways. The esports production and event industry is growing and diversifying rapidly. In the last kind of 5 to 10 years, there were about 2 or 3 partners that you could go to and say, we want you to execute upon this esport event. That's been diversifying pretty significantly across the board now, and in almost every region you have a pretty decent selection of folks you can RFP. The other big piece is the organizations, competitive organizations. You have a lot of multi-game organizations that are growing rapidly, acquiring teams and providing a sense of legitimacy across the board to various teams, and I think we'll continue to see that grow. And then I also have, under the partnerships here, utilizing the passionate player base. This goes to that community growth metric area that you want to foster very early on. One of the things that we've found here, both for Vainglory as well as for Capcom Pro Tour, and we'll be doing it a bit more for Rocket League in the future, is that if we empower various communities to take our live tournaments, our kind of keystone tentpole tournaments, and if we send them a clean feed and they are able to rebroadcast it, we get significantly larger reach. It's about a 20 to 30% boost with almost no additional workload for us. Some challenges that you can run into when it comes to the esports, in particular with mobile. Competitive play experiences, there's new options out there that you don't have to necessarily look like a League of Legends. And I know the presentation before me kind of reiterated this, but I think mobile in particular has a lot of very new opportunities to say what is unique about the mobile space. What can we do? Where can we have events? How can the events be more of this lifestyle product that people want to be engaged with, that people want to talk about? Content itself, what is exciting about the content? How can that be different because of mobile? And I think there's a lot of opportunities there that are really starting to get explored. And then right now, one of the biggest challenges is that mobile simply is not seen as a top-tier competitive ecosystem yet. I think the big key is yet there. Esports as a whole went through this in the 2007 to 2012 timeframe, and now it's kind of, okay, now everyone wants to get involved. All the large sports organizations are starting to want to get involved. And mobile's a couple of years behind that still, but it's really just a question of when and not if. But that is currently definitely a challenge. And then the last big one up here is that high-quality mobile game streaming. It is absolutely a challenge at the moment as well. So at Twitch here, we measure success a few ways. We look at the unique viewers and minutes watched, video views. That's kind of a standard one across the board, but we don't necessarily put as much emphasis into it. We're looking at more along the uniques and how long are they watching, kind of tracking how that experience goes through. Live event attendance obviously is very important, but it's not necessarily the only measure, especially if you're doing more unique types of content. International support, I think that's an area that a lot of organizations don't necessarily take advantage of early on. Talent is another big piece. I think there's a huge opportunity for the growth of talent to become personalities in ways that they grow with your community as opposed to necessarily just trying to identify external talent and utilize them at very high cost. And then, of course, we at Twitch want to identify financial stability, which kind of rolls into how we treat esports as a mechanism to continue that loop between your viewership, your engagement on stream, and then your engagement in game. And I think we are nearly out of time. I want to get to a video here, so I'm going to kind of skip through this one a little quick, but if there's some time after, feel free to come up and we can run through this. But there's a lot of learnings from the Vainglory kind of program that we ran into. The biggest one, though, that I do want to make sure to run into is ensuring that you have operational escalation plans across the board to make sure that anything that comes up, whether it's between a developer, between partners, between community, it's very easy to handle that. But I want to get to a video here that just covers our last World Championship here in Hollywood to give you an experience of what a mobile esport can look like.
Welcome to the first ever Vainglory World Championship.
To old school, can they get done on the map? It's huge! This is gonna be the crystal! What was that?
He's getting in there, a lot of damage, a lot of basics off. One more Helio's not gonna land. Second Helio misses, status so low. What do you do in this situation? Oh, I do not
is the
know
play.
if he can do this. Status is pinned in. Mango gets down, old school on the backside. Status goes for it. Oh, Big Stars! What? Take game 3.
Well, Ryan will make himself available after this session just outside if anyone does come up with any questions. And thank you very much, Ryan, for a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.